Hi, Frank. It looks like you guys are muted. Your computer might be muted.
When they hear.
Okay. We're getting sound now. Thank you.
Excellent. It's surprising how little they hear. There's a question about wondering what the neighbors hear when we're doing Vajrakalaya sadhana with all the instruments and that. So, yeah, we when they hear when the Dharma Center started.
We're getting sound now.
The first empowerment that was done in Rochester, actually the second one, but the first one was done by our organization. Now Kenshin Kempo Koncho Gelson had come to Rochester in 1985, I think, and did a Chenresig empowerment at a Tai Chi center over on South Clinton. Gretchen and I happened to be there for that. But the second empowerment that was given here was given we had one member, he was our treasurer, Michael Kalesa. He was an engineer at Kodak, a very sharp guy, young guy, but very proper guy. And he had this nice little apartment off East Avenue, been in an apartment complex. And so we had this empowerment there, bells and all the whole stuff. And he got kicked out of his apartment by the management. Right, they had all these shoes lying in the common hallway, and he just, he had a lot of like senior citizens living there, and they didn't appreciate it, I think. So we were always sensitive to, what kind of sound are we making, especially when we were doing chud practice, blowing the thigh bone trumpet, for instance, and the drums and that. But we would look outside, and it's surprisingly little, unless you have the windows wide open, but even there, it doesn't travel as far as it seems. And for these guys, I think they don't even know.
Usually that guy's like sawing some wood next door.
Yeah. Good to go. Okay. Hi, Rob. Welcome.
Hi, from Brian.
Brian. Nice to see you.
Hey, Brian.
I met him and his wife Kelly
James Keene.
at Darshan Institute years ago. First time I went, and been friends ever since.
You got it.
Yeah, and all these, 90% of the people have probably been.
Yeah. We're all Dharma brothers for sure. For sure. Okay, so welcome everybody. Here we are. We are continuing with Kala Rinpoche's book, Profound Buddhism. And we're on the chapter on mind, which seems relevant. I had a thought today, though, that I just thought I might say, maybe for some of our Zoomers. It struck me that the Buddha Dharma is so vast. And this is something, if you're anything like me, that is kind of overwhelming. We often have people who come to the Dharma Center, and it's just kind of staggering because there are all these different tankas and deities and colors and what's going on, and all the complexity of the shrine, and it can be kind of overwhelming. But eventually you see that it's really just one thing that's happening, and it's just that human beings are so varied, and also each one of us too. It's like we need different medicines, you might say, at different times. The greatness of it, though, is that with a teacher like Gar Rinpoche, it's just one thing going on. And somehow you're being guided through just these natural interactions, nothing manipulated, nothing really thought out, just living your life, but, working on your intention, bodhicitta and that. And it's certainly just even at a distance, even through seemingly in a secondary way through a Dharma center when Gar Rinpoche is not physically here. But Lama Tarchet said something years ago that he said, if you haven't broken samaya, if you haven't put up these really serious obstacles amongst your Dharma brothers and sisters, between a practitioner and guru, the Lama's mind, the Lama's wisdom mind, Lama Tarchet said, is flowing through the Dharma Center. And I really think that's true to the little bit that I've understood that. And, it makes me very happy because we have people that come here on a Sunday who we're never going to see again. Who knows? Sometimes they just walk in by mistake. They're looking for AA downstairs or they thought something else. Who knows what they thought? And yet, I really, truly believe that they're benefited by having touched his wisdom mind. And of course, that wisdom mind is our wisdom mind. We're just exceptionally fortunate. So it occurred to me this today, that I was watching, I think it was just a film of a football game. And you know how these people are all excited and yelling and screaming. And you see how it comes from mind. So I thought about laughter. It's like when the mind is really happy, like laughter is just this natural kind of, result. It's this natural kind of experience, this natural kind of manifestation of that mind. But because it's just Buddha nature, because Buddha nature is not fundamentally divided in the way that we divide things in our Saha world, this world of patient endurance. Because the Buddha mind in nature is not divided, we also have the ability to laugh in a way to connect us to our Buddha nature. So it's that mind that we're trying to realize and come to, and you might say live out of, although it's more than that, you become it, so to speak. But nonetheless, it seems artificial. I'm just going to laugh when I'm not really feeling like laughing. But the nature of it is such that, as you practice makes perfect. Because the Buddha mind is not really, in the end, divisible into all these different things. And so this is the genius of this practice and all of that. Because out of the just, infinity of appearances, there are the dharmas with a small d in Sanskrit, phenomena. Out of the small d, there are the sublime d, the capital D, which is what the Buddha taught and taught, since too, subsequently, as far as to our ordinary dualistic mind, what are the things that are sacred? What are the things that actually encourage us in the right direction or train us in the right way rather than just going around in circles? So in the sense, everything's Buddha nature, yes, but at the same time, it's a very high realized state to be acting in that way. And these practices allow us to do that. When we're doing the conventional teachings, what His Holiness Dalai Lama teaches all the time, what Khenpo's teaching here, the path of the perfections. We have this idea of, perfections. I'm here and I'm kind of imperfect, so I'm working on the perfections. It's perfecting me to get to perfection, so to speak. And that's extremely skillful. But at the same time in the practice, there is the Vajrayana, the Tantrayana, the practice of the pure wisdom state. So you can imagine yourself seemingly to be a Buddha. You can imagine all of this to be a pure land. And it works because that division is actually something that's not true. That division, that gap between us and the experience of our true nature is a totally arbitrary and manufactured kind of thing. It's adventitious. It's like the clouds, they can blow away. So these practices allow you, in the conventional way, there's this purification that's going on just by our intention, just by our confession, by our examination of our mind, of practicing awareness along with our mindfulness, because then you find every time you've dropped off from your mindfulness that you've become unmindful, you are aware that you've been unmindful, and that's aware. So like Garam Pache says, eventually the mindfulness drops away and everything's just awareness. So that's the conventional path. But I'm just so struck at the complete blessing that we've all had by the way that Garam Pache, in the midst of, this incomprehending world, yet has taught the Tantra. I mean, traditionally, these teachings, realizing their great kind of power and realizing the great ability of human beings to corrupt anything, to twist anything to their own worldly ends. And therefore you take something really sacred and you just pollute it and make it actually worse. You have a greater responsibility. A person with a greater responsibility has a heavier karma when they're doing wrong. So we're in this situation. How wonderful. It occurred to me too that it's like this business of putting our hands together, this simple prayer gesture. It has an effect on the mind. You can see it immediately. It's very hard to be 110% arrogant and hold your hands in that position and then be berating somebody. There's just something there that's disharmonious. And so there's this natural kind of harmonious state that we sort of plug into, even if we're just imagining it, or sort of like Lama Tarchan said, he was the master of samsara. He was a great pig in ignorance, and he was a great rooster in desire, and he was a great snake in anger. He was the king of samsara. He's using every single thing. So the other night, just one other aside before we start in on the book again, forgive me, but Gretchen came across a video that we have on a computer file of Gaura Rinpoche teaching the symbols and the longhorn to Rob and I don't know who else was there. Ari was there translating. She was helping too. You were there at that one? Yeah. In our house? Yeah. I think it was just Rob. Do you remember Rob? Who was in?
It was me and Jerry.
Jerry. Yeah.
I don't remember if he was or not, but if he was, he might have been training.
Unima was there. But to see Rinpoche playing the symbols, giving instruction on the symbols with the, the patterns in the Vajrakalaya sadhana. And it was so amazing because, he didn't have a text. It's just, I've been doing this for years now, but I have to have my text to know when the pattern changes or whatever. And I even noticed with Ari that she didn't have to do that. She would have to sometimes sit and think when she was writing out the notation for us. What is it here? What is it here? But she knew. But Rinpoche playing these things, it's so subtle and so beautiful. I just feel like such a clod when I watch him playing those symbols, those big unwieldy symbols, and he's just making these beautiful sounds, and it's so delicate. And so that kind of training is something that, when you practice yourself, you really start to have an in the gut kind of appreciation for that. And of course, with that comes, no matter how arrogant you are, there's going to be less arrogance, because you see that kind of development and the sacrifice of just being there teaching all of this all the time. When he's happy sitting in his little hut in Arizona, he doesn't need to be doing the social thing. So anyway, just some random thoughts. Okay, so we're on page 143 in Kalu Rinpoche's book, Profound Buddhism. And this is the chapter on mind. And there's like a big footnote or something, just an introduction to it by the translator. It says, the use of the term mind brings the possibility of confusion if one is not careful. In Tibetan, as in French or English, many terms are used to convey the nuances necessary in speaking about the mind, such as mind, consciousness, psyche, intellect. Nevertheless, the term sim, in Tibetan, rendered as mind, has generic value, covering a field of meaning appreciably larger than French or English, since it is used to convey the notions of soul, used in theological terminology, and of being, used in metaphysics. It is necessary to see that the word mind sometimes refers to the psychological domain and sometimes to ontology. So ontology, for us philosophical types, is the study of reality. From the Buddhist point of view, one would probably say that one remains in the domain of psychology when one envisions an atrophied function, the ego, and that one passes into ontology when one sees the mind in its original purity as an unlimited, eternal mind, free of any conditioning. In the teaching transcribed here in this text, the reader who wants to avoid confusion must not lose the view of this double meaning. In one word, it is at times a question of the superficial apprehension of the mind that we take as normal, and sometimes it is the true nature of the mind that is to be discovered. Although mind is there for all eternity, it underlies the multiple fluctuations of the ego with which we falsely identify. The nature of mind certainly is the main teaching of Kala Rinpoche, a subject to which he continually returned. This is why, although the nature of the mind is extensively covered in this chapter, we also frequently find some reminders or compliments in other chapters. Okay. So now to Kala Rinpoche's words. We have a superficial notion of what the mind is. For us, it is what has the feeling of existing and thinks it is me, or I exist. The mind is also that which is aware of the thoughts and experiences, the emotions, and according to circumstances, feels happy or miserable. Other than that, we do not really truly know our mind. It is even probable that we have never asked ourselves this question: what is the mind? Now, his next little section is the mind perceives, not the organs. First, it is obvious that the mind has no material existence. It is not an object defined by color, size, volume, or form. None of these characteristics is applicable. One cannot point to the mind and say, it is that. In this sense, the mind is empty. Although the mind is lacking form, color, and so on, it is not enough to conclude that it has no existence. Thoughts, feelings, and conflicting emotions that the mind feels and produces prove that something functions and exists, that the mind is not just empty. What is this feeling of existing? Where is it located? Outside or inside the body? If it is located inside the body, what feels it? The flesh, blood, bone, nerves, veins, lungs, the heart? If you carefully reflect on this, you have to admit that no limb or organ claims its own existence by saying I. Therefore, the mind cannot be identified with a part of the body. Let us take the example of the eye. The eye does not proclaim its own existence. It does not make the claim, I exist, or I must look at an external form. This form is beautiful, the other one is not. I am attached to the first one, and I reject the second one. The I itself has no volition, senses no feeling, neither attachment nor aversion. It is the mind that has the feeling of existing, that perceives, that judges, that is attached, or that rejects. It is the same for the ear and sounds, the nose and smells, the tongue and tastes, the skin and contacts, the mental body and phenomenon. The sense organs do not perceive, the mind does. Next section is called A Car Needs a Driver. The organs, unconscious by nature, are not the mind, but they are rather like a house in which people live. The inhabitants are called consciousnesses. So there's the visual consciousness, the auditory consciousness, the olfactory consciousness, the gustatory consciousness, the tactile consciousness, the mental consciousness. These consciousnesses do not exist by themselves autonomously. They are no other than mind. The body is similar to an automobile and the mind to a driver. When the car is not in use, it can have all the equipment necessary for driving, an engine, wheels, gasoline, and so on, in perfect shape. Yet it can go nowhere by itself. Similarly, a body lacking mind, even if it possesses all the organs, is only a corpse. It may have eyes, ears, and a nose, yet it cannot see or hear or feel. Some people think that death is not only of the body, but also that of the mind. The body becomes a corpse, the mind simply ceases to exist. But this is not so. The mind is not born, does not die, and is not affected by illness. It is eternal. What perceives the forms as registered by the eye, sounds heard by the ear, and all other objects through the other sense organs, that which is aware and not interrupted by death of the body, is therefore the mind. We have yet to define the true nature of this mind. Given that the mind lacks material characteristics, as we saw previously, it is not possible to designate mind as a visible object or a thing easily recognizable, because if it were, someone would show it to us. Everyone having a mind must refer to oneself, and with the guidance of a master, proceed with an investigation leading to the discovery of what the mind truly is. Does it have form, color, volume? Is it located outside or inside the body? These are necessary questions to which one must find an answer by personal experience, even if one has already received theoretical explanations such as those that have been given. Next. Listening, reflecting, and meditating. The practice of Dharma is always composed of 3 stages: listening, reflecting, and meditating. Listening is receiving theoretical teachings and instructions. It is essential to be able to faithfully recall what has been told or read. So often they translate it as listening. Many times it's translated as hearing. You hear the Dharma. Then the second is reflecting, or sometimes they say, analyzing, contemplating. Reflecting consists of making a discursive examination of the data that one has received, or proceeding to an investigation to seek answers to certain questions. In the present case, for example, one searches for the form and color of the mind, its location, its level of existence, and so on. Then the third is meditating, which takes place once certain conclusions have been drawn by reflecting. Meditating must be non-discursive and without discontinuity. So these 3 stages constitute an obligatory sequence. What is given here belongs to the listening phase. It is necessary to memorize it before approaching the next stage. To describe the mind, one considers 3 aspects. Its essence is emptiness. Its nature is clarity. Its mode of functioning is intelligence. Now he's going to talk on those. But just a word here. These 3 stages constitute an obligatory sequence. I think this is so critical. The Dharma, and if we can imagine ourselves as the Tibetans, 1,500 years ago, or however long ago it was, here you are, and how did it happen? I don't know. I mean, they have a history of it. But at the same time, to have that kind of a change in a society, you go from this, military-like, wild, fearsome kind of people sweeping out of the Tibetan plateau to even conquer the capital of China. Like, that famous thing that you see in National Geographic and on TV, all those terracotta statues that were buried with that emperor. Is that what they're called? The terracotta warriors. Each one is so expressive and they're all different, individualistic. It's amazing art. But that's in Xi'an, China. That was the capital of China. And the Tibetans conquered it. There is to this day, we saw it when we were in Lhasa. There's a pillar, a peace pillar. I don't know why the Cultural Revolution, they didn't destroy it, but nonetheless, it's the peace between the Tibetan emperor and the Chinese emperor from way back then. But somehow at that time, it's said that the Chinese emperor gave his daughter as a bride to the Tibetan emperor, and she brought the first Buddha figure to Tibet. what really happened, who knows? I mean, I believe that story is true, but at the same time, how do you explain this kind of a change in a society, that you go from this warlike kind of thing and from the top down, and you have the emperor saying, okay, we're going to be Buddhists now. And they spent centuries sending their best and brightest. And this whole, I mean, people were into it. Not that there weren't divisions within the society, of course, but that's what's even more amazing. Somehow they pulled this off. There was broad enough support and benefit. They recognized like the benefit of the Dharma. And so it kept building for centuries. But nonetheless, it must have been overwhelming when you approach India 1,500 years after the Buddha's parinirvana, the full development of cultural Buddhism in India. I mean, again, like they say, 84,000 different practices. I mean, it's just like same feeling that I felt coming here for the first time, overwhelmed.
The same thing happened in India with the Shuka. Shuka said, oh, we're done fighting, we're all Buddhists.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a wonderful history of things that happen in India, but my point right now is that for the Tibetans, from this, they didn't even have a writing system. I mean, they had education, but they didn't have a writing system. And then you look at undoubtedly the highest civilization of its era, in India. I mean, just remarkable. I mean, after all, remember, it's some years after, but that's where Columbus was trying to go. So India was more attractive than Europe. But nonetheless, my point being is that the Tibetans, when confronted with that, systematized these teachings to give us like a framework. And it's not something that you sort of attach to and that's you don't go any farther, but it's a guideline. And so this tremendous thing of hearing the Dharma, listening, and then thinking about it, contemplating, analyzing, and then based on that kind of confidence that you've built up through your own exploration, not just listening to someone, some authority figure. I mean, we rely on authority figures, of course, but there's still to be thought through, not blind faith. And then the next thing, meditating. And again, meditation in Tibetan is gom, means to grow accustomed to. So what are you growing accustomed to? These conclusions, you might say, that you've come to through this contemplation, this deep contemplation, which comes through your careful study of the Dharma, at least enough to learn something and then practice it. You don't have to learn the entire Dharma. So this is really helpful. This is so helpful. So when I look with my jaded eyes, across our own country, all the interest in meditation in that. But who is doing the contemplation step? And who's doing the listening step? It's just so remarkable to me. We're such a in a hurry kind of culture, but they often don't even have the idea of transformation or realization. I mean, meditation off. I got one today on my email. There's some lawyer in North Carolina who's selling meditation. You get credit for continuing education, but the promotion of it is all about I don't know, just de-stressing yourself, and nothing wrong with that. But again, we've got these profound teachings. You listen to the teachings and you just go, oh my goodness, this is something that I hadn't thought about. Is this really true? So you contemplate. Again, from hearing the Dharma with just a modicum of belief or openness, the mind opens up just a little bit. The mind calms down a little bit, because in this, again, the first noble truth, every time that you look, you're going to see dissatisfaction, sort of imperfection. This is the world. The world, the unenlightened world, the world as it appears to the mind that is just, completely invested in self-grasping without even understanding what that self is. So when we look, it's agitation, and that's a reason that we don't look. We take false refuges. We do all sorts of diversions and distractions so we don't have to see the state of our own mind. There's something in there that's fearful. But to hear the Dharma, to hear the possibility even, to hear it coming out from people who have trained themselves and know then there's immediately an opening to the mind. Instead of this just complete chaos, there's space. And then when one contemplates that and is checking these things out, so to speak, through your own reasoning and experience, then the space is a little greater, you might say. And then finally, by the meditation, that space bigger and bigger and bigger. And within that space, you can function. Within that space, you have all the problems you always had, but somehow they're not 100% the story. There's Lama Tarchin would say, yes, my mind is vast. I have plenty of room to dance. So this simple thing of listening, contemplating, meditating is so helpful. And like he says here, obligatory. We can't do without it. So all the stuff, all the ads and people selling meditation and that without doing this process, unfortunately, they're cutting themselves out of really a great opportunity. But welcome to samsara, I guess. Okay, so he's talking about emptiness, clarity, and intelligence now. So describing the mind. How do we describe the mind? Well, first is emptiness. The essence of the mind is to be empty. This means, as already pointed out, that the mind has no material existence. It has no form, no color, no volume, no size. It is untouchable, invisible, like space. Next, its nature is clarity. So the essence is emptiness. Its nature is clarity. The mind, however, is not like an obscure space which the sun, the moon, and the stars cannot illuminate, but rather it is like space during the day or the space of a lighted room. This is a comparison and only an approximation. It means that the mind possesses a certain power of knowing. This is not knowledge itself, but illumination, or the ability of consciousness that renders knowledge possible. This ability includes the ability to produce manifestations. When you think of America or India, your mind has the ability of making their inner image appear. This capacity of knowing and the ability of evoking are the clarity of the mind. Because of light, you can see objects in the room where you are and be aware of their presence. Because of clarity, the mind also has the ability of knowing. What is meant by clarity of the mind is slightly different from clarity in an ordinary sense. Ordinary clarity allows for the exercise of visual functions solely, while clarity of the mind makes it possible not only to see, but also to hear, smell, taste, touch, and to be aware of pleasure or displeasure of the mind. Therefore, it is a clarity with a field of application that is extremely vast. All right, so the essence of the mind, in describing the mind, essence of the mind is emptiness, the nature of the mind is clarity, and its mode of functioning is intelligence without obstruction. The room in which you are seated contains emptiness, room space, and clarity, lighting. Nevertheless, it is not enough to say it has a mind. One must find a third element of description. For a mind to be, in addition to emptiness and clarity, it must have intelligence without obstruction. So there's a footnote here. Intelligence, or in Sanskrit vidya, and in Tibetan rikpa, is not the opposite of stupidity, but it has the sense of intellectual ability, the faculty to understand and know. All right. So one must find this third element of the description. For a mind to be, in addition to emptiness and clarity, it must have intelligence without obstruction. This intelligence allows us to effectively know separate things without confusion. The mind is not only aware of phenomenon, which is its clarity, but it recognizes them without confusion, which is intelligence. In what it sees, for example, Mind knows what is the sky, a house, a man, and so on. On this basis of emptiness and clarity, there is intelligence without obstruction. It is the ability to identify, evaluate, and understand. For example, intelligence says this is an object, it is beautiful or ugly. Identification applies to sounds whose volume and quality are perceived, to smells being repulsive or pleasant, to taste whose different nuances are recognized, and to pleasant or unpleasant mental experiences. The mind is emptiness, clarity, and intelligence together. Is such a spirit small? No, since it has the ability to make appear and to embrace the whole universe. Is it large? One cannot assert that either. If we have a localized pain in a very precise place in our body, caused, let us say, by an insect sting, we identify our mind with this tiny place by saying, it hurts. Everyone identifies with his or her body that the mind completely occupies. This happens on a vast scale for an elephant or on a small scale for an insect. In fact, the mind itself, outside of all identification, is neither small nor great. It is free of these concepts. The fundamental mind is the same for all beings. If one recognizes the mode of being of the mind, it is no other than awakening. Emptiness is the absolute body, in Sanskrit Dharmakaya. Clarity is the body of perfect experience, in Sanskrit Sambhogakaya. Intelligence is the body of emanation, in Sanskrit Nirmanakaya. Union of the three components, emptiness, clarity, and intelligence, is called mind. It is also called the Tathagata Garbha, the potential of awakening. So Tathagata, this appellation that was applied to the Buddha, it just means the thus come one. That's all they could say about him. Garbha is womb. So the womb of the Buddhas, basically. He's saying the union of the three components, emptiness, clarity, intelligence, is called mind. It's also called the Tathagata Garbha, the potential of awakening.
So the name, take out the garbage, is really hard. It's really good for remembering.
Tathagata Garbha. Take out the garbage. When the three components are not recognized for what they are, it is the ordinary state of being. Emptiness is expressed as mind. Clarity is expressed as speech. Intelligence without obstruction is the body. The three components of pure mind are frozen into the three components of an ordinary personality. By the meditation of Mahamudra, the true nature of the mind is recognized, and the three components appear as the three bodies of awakening, Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya. In truth, a Buddha and an ordinary being are identical. They possess fundamentally the same nature. Recognizing this nature is being a Buddha. Not recognizing it is being an ordinary being. It is the only difference. It would take us a long time to examine in detail all the implications of the nature of the mind, the cycle of existence, and liberation. A way to summarize them is to refer to the words of Gampopa. The mind without artificial creation is happiness. Water without pollution is pure. Think of that. The mind without artificial creation is happiness. Water without pollution is pure. When we let the mind dwell as it is in its own nature, inner happiness arises of itself. Water left alone is smooth and pure. The mind agitated by many thoughts is in turmoil. Released from an overabundance of thoughts, it regains its own limpidity. Limpidity is like a word that Kempo would use. Limpidity is just clearness. As emptiness, clarity, and intelligence, our mind is perfectly good in and of itself and is naturally free of suffering, but we do not recognize it. We think it is me, and we bind ourselves with the cord of ego, thinking from now on, I must be happy. It is necessary for me to avoid all unpleasantness. Locked into this attitude, the mind becomes shriveled and creates its own suffering. Now he's going to talk about the four veils. Although we possess Tathagata Garbha, the womb of the Buddhas, the potential for awakening, and are Buddha by nature, how is it that we do not experience the qualities of this nature, but are afflicted by all the limitations of an ordinary being? This is because of the veils. When did these veils appear? They really have no origin. They have covered the mind since it has existed. In other words, since always. First is the veil of ignorance. The fundamental mind is also called the potential of going into felicity. So in Sanskrit, Sugata Garbha. Su is bliss, and Gata is to go. Sugata Garbha, the womb of going to bliss. Expression synonymous of Tathagata Garbha, potential of awakening. It comes from one of the designations of the Buddha as an awakened being, the one who has gone into felicity, Sugata, one who has gone to Sugata. All right. The fundamental mind is also called the potential of going into felicity. It belongs to all beings. Not recognizing it is ignorance and is the main veil covering the mind. Our eyes allow us to clearly see all external objects. Nevertheless, they cannot see our own face or see themselves. In the same way, the mind does not see itself and does not recognize itself for what it is. This is called the veil of ignorance. Then the next veil is the veil of latent conditioning. The first consequence of ignorance is duality. Where there is only emptiness, the mind falsely conceives a me as being the center of all experience. Where there is only clarity, it conceives perceived objects as others. This phenomenon is easily understood by referring to a dream. Not seeing the true nature of a dream world, we divide it into two parts. There are a subject that we identify as ourselves and objects making up an external universe. In fact, both are no other than mind. All our experience functions on this same mode. Dividing the unique mind in two parts, we live in the universe of duality of subject-object. It is the second veil, called the veil of latent conditioning. So we're kind of moving out. Now the third veil is the veil of conflicting emotions, right? From the notion of me springs hope of obtaining what is pleasant and what makes me feel comfortable in existence, as well as the fear of not obtaining what we desire and fear of living in threatening situations. Hope and fear are grafted on the sides of me. The other side of duality, the notion of other, includes all sense objects, forms, sounds, smells, tastes, contacts, or mental objects. Any object perceived as pleasant creates joy, and any object perceived as unpleasant is upsetting. Then these feelings are transformed into attachment and aversion. From the duality of me and other, hope and fear, as well as attachment and aversion, are produced. They come from nowhere other than the emptiness of the mind, and have therefore no material existence or an entity of their own. But not recognizing this, any more than recognizing the real nature of phenomenon, we grant them an undue reality. This is called blindness or mental opacity. One finds a group of three basic conflicting emotions: attachment, aversion, and blindness, from which three other ones proceed. From attachment proceeds greed. From aversion proceeds jealousy. From mental opacity proceeds pride. So this term of latent conditioning, going back a step, so we get the veil of ignorance, fundamental ignorance, leading to this sense of duality, which is latent conditioning. And now we're in the kleshas, the conflicting emotions. But in talking about the latent conditionings, in Sanskrit, vasanas, in Tibetan bak chak, are extremely numerous, the latent conditionings, created by karma and forming the deepest layers of the consciousness. They not only shape our mode of perception, interpretation, and reaction, but also the category of existence that we experience. This appears on different levels. Our small habits, first of all including our instincts, are part of this conditioning. Our dreams are its expression, as well as the type of existence we have assumed, with its congenital tendencies that are its own. Nevertheless, the first of these conditionings affecting the totality of ordinary beings, human beings and animals, is the propensity for us to interpret any experience in dualistic terms of subject and object. So the latent conditioning basically is subject and object. And now he is still talking about the veil of conflicting emotions. Again, greed, jealousy, pride. This gives 6 main conflicting emotions. The 3 basic conflicting emotions can be subdivided in many ways. Attributed to attachment are 21,000 ramifications relating to the type of object to which it appears. Attachment to a person, a house, a vehicle, and so on. The same process is also detected in 21,000 variants of aversion and blindness, and 21,000 conflicting emotions composed of a blend of the 3 previous ones. This is the source for the traditional 84,000 conflicting emotions. Our mind is inhabited by a multitude of conflicting emotions constituting another veil. So again, in this, highly symbolic and traditional breakdown, there are 21,000 negative mind states coming from our aversion. There's 21,000 that come from our attachments. There's 21,000 that come from our fundamental ignorance and blindness. And then there's 21,000 that come from the mixture of various degrees of these 3 together. So you get 4 times 21, 84, 84,000. Obviously a highly symbolical term. All right, so then finally, the veil of karma. Under the influence of conflicting emotions, we accomplish all kinds of negative acts with body, speech, and mind, which form the veil of karma. Therefore, we have 4 veils that successively engender each other. First, the veil of ignorance, the mind not recognizing itself. Second is the veil of latent conditioning, of duality, splitting I from the other. Third is the veil of conflicting emotions, the 84,000 perturbations resulting from duality. And then the veil of karma, negative acts accomplished under the power of the conflicting emotions. It reminds me of this story of the Buddha. He had one of the monks, his monks was having, trouble, was feeling frustrated in practice, meditation, and he came to the Buddha, what do I do? And the Buddha had him, take a rope or a string, something like that, and tie a knot, and tie a knot on top of that, and knot on top of it. There were like 6, I can't remember, I think it's 6, the 6 consciousnesses, nonetheless, 6 knots all, tied together. And he said, how do you undo this? Do you just start pulling because you have great desire to be out of all these knots? And you start pulling, what happens? He said, well, they get tighter. Yes. So you have to untie them, but in the right order. And then, then it works. This is the veil of karma. Right now, somewhere I think Shantideva says, it's like this veil of karma. It's like it colonizes our mind. There's just so much going on, and our mind is, distracted into that all the time. And so one of the advantages of practice is that by starting to look at your mind and see the afflictive emotions arise, and of course this is part of the listening and then contemplating, we be able to recognize these afflictive emotions as they arise. We're looking for them, so to speak. So that's what's a deeper level. That's what's producing all of our karma. And then deeper into the duality, when we're practicing bodhicitta, we're like sort of confronting our duality all the time. And all of these practices, are the expression of non-duality. So this is, remarkably skillful and workable. But yeah, this outer complexity of karma inside the afflictive emotions, which of course are out of control and like a hurricane. And then within that, the sort of this jewel of duality is producing all this stuff. And lower than that, the fundamental ignorance, that produces all of it. Okay, where are we right now? Thank you. Yes, purity and blossoming. Let's see. This is like a very heavy chapter, and we've got. I mean, this is like Rinpoche's, Ari's book, Vajrakalaya. I've never been able to get through it because every thought in it is so profound, and you just keep going back and starting over again. And it's so amazing because, forgive my aside here, but it's just the nature of this thing that no matter where you open it up, I mean, so the white torma practice that we did last night, forgive me, I'm just going to read this paragraph. I included the white torma offering text as a supplement to the practice manual of Vajrakalaya, since it is extremely important to understand the meaning rather than to just mimic Tibetan sounds. It has been translated for recitation in English. The white torma offering is particularly necessary where practitioners must consecrate a new place for Buddhist practice. Meditators should understand that the local deities, earth goddesses, and land-holding spirits of mountains, waters, and the 5 elements have been there long before one arrived and will be there long after one has departed. Secret mantra sadhanas practices must absolutely be practiced in places where the Dharma has never been heard before. So maybe this is one reason, we have such support from Rinpoche, even just thinking about our place, why? Well, without even knowing it, we're clearly practicing in places the Dharma has never been heard before. Isn't that something? When such new places are being consecrated, non-humans may cause hindrances for practitioners. These are beings whose experience with humans may be limited to contact with people who were too self-absorbed even to be aware of their existence. Thus, from a worldly perspective, the white torma offering is a sign of civility, an acknowledgement of the landholders and their circumstance, and an offering made with kindness. Through practicing the generosity of the white torma and smoke offerings, practitioners allay the doubts of non-humans and fulfill their wishes through bodhicitta, thus dispelling obstacles to the practice. So that's not bad for just opening something at random, right? And here is Ari's verse from the text. Hung. Gods, nagas, kinglies, furies, harm doers, planetary spirits, smell eaters, Aquarians, demons, menerwats, carnivores, mataris, bulbous ones, mood demons, receptacle girls, and urban flesh eaters with female ghosts, local gods and lords of regions and places, treasures, wealth, and all the rest, bands of spirits, elementals, gods, all lay folk who keep commands and oaths. As you take this golden libation and torma comprised of all things clean, harmful, wicked thoughts are pacified. Thus always be my wholesome allies. In this country's lands and regions, I practice unsurpassed, supreme bodhi, and make effort for sentient one's sake. Thus make my conditions favorable. Pretty special. Okay, I think maybe this is a good place to stop because I'm just a little daunted by, these teachings on mind because they're so important, and he's just laying it out every single sentence here. So we'll stop here on page 152, and next time complete the chapter on mind. Next section is purity and blossoming. Then after that, the signs of emptiness, then primordial awareness, individualized consciousness, three supports of existence, the waking state, the dream, and the bardo, and then primordial awareness, individualized consciousness, and then differentiated consciousness, and then finally organs issued from the consciousnesses and objects of senses. So all that sounds pretty dry, but I'm sure it won't be. Okay. Yeah, again, the mind can only take so much, but if it points people in the right direction, that's what it's for. Next week, no study group.
Practicing.
But I mean, just as a reminder
To everybody, yeah.
Might be here.
Yeah. So next week, no Thursday night study group. Okay, any questions, anyone? Yeah, pass the mic over to Stephanie.
This kind of relates back to my question I had the other week about how did this all begin, and it says here, the veils have covered the mind since it has existed. In other words, since always. So we can get rid of the veils?
Yes.
Theoretically?
Yes. More than theoretically.
But I mean, does that mean that we are getting rid of mind?
No, we're getting rid of the ignorance, the non-recognition of the mind. So again, this vast mind, and somehow we see it as me.
Right.
That's all there is to it. It's just amazing. This amazing kind of, focus and mistake.
So once we clean it, it'll always be clean, or will
Yes.
it cycle back around and we'll suddenly have veils again?
No, it depends on the level, but it's possible to have a shallow realization experience and then just sort of be satisfied and just keep on your merry way, and your bad habits come back and you kind of even lose awareness, maybe just as some sort of distant memory of that realization experience. But with a profound realization, it doesn't go away. The nature of the mind is the nature of the mind. And so the greatness of, I think, one of the greatnesses of the Dharma is that, there are people who actually come to a profound realization just sort of on their own, spontaneously. It's obviously on their past lifetimes and what they've done. But if you don't have the support of the culture, there are some great figures who, that's fine. They suddenly have such an insight into compassion and wisdom that they just drop all that baggage they've had all this time. But there are others, it's tricky where you can be misled. This ego clinging is a very powerful thing. You think about it, all the suffering in the world comes from it. And it's just amazing when you read about it, even just in a historical way. It's just, it's just staggering, and in our own lives, when we think of the moment to moment kind of, disappointments or agitations or worries, boy, if you had to add all that up, if there weren't this idea of the Dharma, I don't know how people do it. I really don't. They only do it by not thinking about it, I think. But nonetheless, yes. So the Dalai Lama has said it's like we have a cloth and it's been stained by all these things that he's describing. And the practice is cleaning that cloth. That's what's happening. But when the cloth is clean, it's clean. He says samsara is the state of our mind blinded by ignorance. And when it's gone, it goes on. It is our mind burdened by suffering. That is samsara. But when it's purified, the mind continues, but there's no suffering.
But there was never a time that the cloth was clean in the beginning.
Well, for
I
us,
come back to this question.
Yeah, exactly. For us right now, it's always been covered.
Right.
They're like hints, or you get like intimations or something, that even the fact that we're talking about suffering, in a sense, is wisdom, because there's this sense that that's wrong. We think of suffering as wrong, shouldn't be happening. That's obviously coming from some sort of appreciation of wisdom and an inherent kind of wisdom. But the greatness is that the practices do that. I mean, the practices are the nature of mind. And so we don't have to make them work. We just have to do them. In fact, the hardest thing is just to do them without ego, because now I am practicing, I mean, it's like, but it's all right. It's all right because, it's deeper and real, and all the kind of tricks we do and all the thoughts we have, those are the cloud-like things that can blow away. But yeah, kind of amazing. We want to think, I think maybe it's cultural. We think in such a progressive way, right. The whole West, you're going from here to there.
And about time.
And about time, yeah.
Like, because time isn't, like, all time is now, right? Could you say that?
Well, time is a concept too. And that's the thing. Some of these things are so powerful for us. We see them as being ultimately real, but they're empty too. I should find somewhere, there's a teaching that the Zen master Dogen gave, calling on being time. And it's very profound. We should find that up again and read it, because I once upon a time found it very helpful, because I'm completely locked into time.
Right.
And you interpret Dharma, you interpret everything in terms of time. And you do practice and you just say, oh, when's this going to be over? We're just stuck in time. It's like, oh, we're in the 7th day of the retreat. Okay, only 2 more to go. All of that. Yeah, and those are all just thoughts. And that's veil. It's one of the veils. Right. Because again, I thought it was interesting what he said about the word mind in English, and he said French. Kalar Rinpoche taught in France a lot, whereas the Tibetan word sem has, different meanings, both psychological and nature of reality kind. So that's really good, because, yeah, we just think in terms of modern psychology and what I'm feeling and all of that. And again, nothing wrong with all that stuff, but we don't have that big perspective of realization. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Seth. I just was wondering if Manjushri's sword of discriminating wisdom has anything to do with cutting through the veils and the knots.
Sure. Exactly right. It's wisdom. Wisdom is the panacea. And what we call compassion is just wisdom seen from kind of dualistic perspective. There's no difference between wisdom and compassion together. And that's actually one of the things of the Tantra in these visualized forms. They're wisdom forms. They're wisdom and compassion together. That's one reason they're said to be so effective. Because normally in our conventional practice, we do some meditation and then we do post-meditation stuff. And then we're going back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth. But in the tantric visualization, you're doing vipassana and shamatha together. And that's something that is said to be one of its effectivenesses. Yeah. Yeah. Patty.
Keen kind of took my question, but I was thinking about ritual implementation and like all the ritual implements that we use in different practices, and just that, like how, like whether it's a purva or whether it's a Manjushri sword or any of those, just seem to be able to be cutting the root of ignorance, and ignorance from when you did that 4-step, kind of bringing us down into the ignorance is the last one, made me think about that, like as if you can cut the ignorance or cut that not recognizing your Buddha nature, then that's the essence. Like if you recognize your Buddha nature, then that's it.
Yeah, you make it's like genetic surgery or something. You can put ointments on the outside and that's good. But if somehow you go into the genes, and that psoriasis goes away forever, where did it go? I don't know. It's very deep kind of healing. And that's something that my own personal belief is, that's what's so powerful about all these different methods. Right. Because even in a very surface kind of way, so when I would go to Yamataka, was always fighting sleep, just exhausted, couldn't pay attention, didn't know what page I was on. I'd be sitting next to Joby, she'd ask me what page we're on. I didn't know, and I'd drop my whole text, I always had to sit next to Gretchen because she was always organized, knew what page we were on. But I was always asleep, and I just fought, it was a real struggle. And so then one time they had me do the easier the chanting. It's the Vajramaster chanting, but it's not the real elaborate chanting like the Russians do that's so mind-boggling beautiful. But just several times in every practice, I would have to be saying something out loud and ring a bell. The fact of having to do that kept me awake, because it's just in your own grossly unenlightened state, it's like the social pressure. If I'm going to goof up in front of all these people, damn it, I'm not going to do that. So now you're motivated through your ego, but you're doing practice and you're having less distraction. So it's so amazingly skillful, because it's like using the Tantra uses our afflictions to realize wisdom. And yet, so all of these things, you can do all of this, and even things that seem like outer practices. It's a hard thing to believe in our kind of modern materialistic way, but there are objects of meditation and objects that are sacred. It just means that they have more power, so to speak. In a way, no. I mean, whether you're experiencing your breath, counting your breaths, or focusing on the hung, in one way, there's no difference, But I can say that conceptually. But in terms of practice, no. That hung has more power. So it's a superior type of meditation. And of course, people don't like to hear that because I think everything's equal and you can't, all of that. But nonetheless, so we're extremely fortunate because all these methods are only here because they've worked. And so in that sense, too, people can have some degree of confidence because, again, it wasn't made up by some charismatic guy. Very, very skillful. Yeah. Anybody? That'll cool us down. Okay. Brian, did you have something? Are you reaching for it? Yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you. I hadn't come across this text before, Kala Rinpoche, and it's fascinating and resonates. So profound gratitude.
Yeah. Thank you for being here. Yeah. Yeah. We've always felt, in a way, mysteriously blessed, the attention we've had from Gar Rinpoche. We're not even his organization, we're the Drikun Chabgun is the head of our actual, in an organizational way. He's the head of the Drikun, yeah. But of course, there's no conflict there at all. But on top of that, that Buddha figure was given to us by Gar Rinpoche. He gave us the horns. We sent people out, Rob out to Arizona and Dayton, and Rinpoche gives us that kind of attention. It's very inspirational, yeah. But I'm not telling you anything you don't know already. I'm trying to sell Gar Rinpoche. It's a very ridiculous spot to be in.
The thing that was pretty clear to me on walking into this room is that it feels like he's here. And when we meditate together, we are connected with his mind. So it's a incredibly refreshing and uplifting.
Yeah.
And yeah. It's no separation.
Yeah. And it's truly amazing because in the beginning, those are just beautiful words, but then you actually start to experience it to different degrees and you realize how unbelievably, when he comes, and I just think we have 100 people show up and we're thinking, hey, it's a good crowd. And I'm thinking, why don't we have 200,000 people here? But it's the way it is. We also had, I'll share one other thing. We had a good friend, a very unusual woman, was at the Rochester Zen Center, and she was from Poland. Somehow she got herself to America before the Iron Curtain came down. She's really an interesting lady, very resourceful, very strong personality. And she was always something of a pain in the rear for the Zen Center because she was always disagreeing with them on one way and another. But it was always from a practice aspect, very strong mind, very strong practitioner. And she took a pilgrimage to Japan, and she went to the great Zen monasteries there, one of them being Daitokuji. And she came to visit us here once because she doesn't practice Tibetan Buddhism, but, we knew her and she knew what we were doing. So she came by. And she told me afterwards, when she was making an offering in our shrine, she had the same experience that she had only experienced at Daitokuji. And I'm sitting here, thinking like, God, all of us working, struggling, just trying to put food on the table, make sure we get enough TV in so we can be totally distracted. I don't want to get too close to your own nature. Maybe have to give something up. But yet, that's the power. And we see that with Gar Rinpoche, certainly. I mean, his life story is just... So when I saw him in that footage the other night teaching Rob, the instruments, I just thought, God. I just heard your voice. Yeah, we kept you off screen.
Quick story about this.
Yeah, give him the mic.
I played like reed instruments and guitar and piano. I never played a bell mouthpiece before. And I just was able to make sounds with it. And I was taking the horns over to Jerry's shop at the time, and we were like doing the melodies to Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy and Led Zeppelin's When the Levee Breaks and stuff like that, just to try to make sound.
Yeah.
And finally, I'm able to make the 3 distinct sounds, even though there's actually way more subtle stuff now. And we go to meet him at your house, and I've had time with him at that point, but not a lot. And then all of a sudden, it's just him showing me this stuff. And because it was him, I was intimidated.
Yeah.
And then it was just like, I can't fail at this because this is serious stuff.
Right.
And he's like, looking back on it now, he just wanted us to do our best.
Yeah.
Like whatever we could do.
Yeah.
If you just go and blow one long note through this section, that probably would have been fine.
Yeah.
And so he started showing me the stuff, and remember Ari was like going through it fast and really particular, and I remember just stopping everyone and going, I don't know if I can do this. And he did the takeaway close on me.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, that's okay. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. And then he just sat there with a big smile on his face, just completely relaxed like Rinpoche always is. And I just said, okay, let's do it. And then all of a sudden, my mind could focus and I could like pay attention more.
Yeah.
I mean, and I did see years ago, we videotaped some of the Nazareth retreat after that. And then he showed us basic stuff. And then as time went by, we learned more subtle and complicated things.
Yeah.
And now it's probably way different from when we first started.
Yeah.
But I just thought I'd tell you about that. He did the takeaway close on me.
Yeah,
It
right,
worked
right.
Totally. Like
It's skillfulness beyond skillfulness. It really is. All right. We dedicate the merit from this evening to all motherly sentient beings. May we never forget these beings that have benefited us, our inherent gratitude, and the suffering that they endure. May we never cease from this work until every last one of them is free. Svaha. Okay. Thank you, Zoomers.
Thanks so much. Good night, you guys.
Good night. Yeah, right. That's one.